Sarah Martinez walked into the corporate headquarters of Pinnacle Financial Services on a crisp Monday morning, her black blazer perfectly pressed and her resume folder clutched tightly in her hands. The towering glass building reflected the city skyline, and she could feel her heart racing as she approached the reception desk. This was her dream job interview for a senior marketing position, something she had worked toward for years. The receptionist, a stern-looking woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, barely glanced up from her computer screen. "You must be here for the interview," she said in a clipped tone, looking Sarah up and down with obvious disapproval. "Take the elevator to the 15th floor. They're expecting you." Sarah thanked her and made her way to the elevator, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling from the receptionist's cold stare. She had encountered this type of judgment before, but she refused to let it dampen her confidence. She had graduated summa cum laude from business school, had 5 years of experience at a prestigious marketing firm, and had generated millions in revenue for her previous employers. When the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, Sarah was greeted by an immaculate office space with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture. Everything was pristine white and chrome, giving the impression of sterile perfection. A young assistant in a crisp white shirt approached her with a forced smile. "Ms. Martinez, please follow me. The interview panel is ready for you," the assistant said, leading her down a long hallway lined with awards and certificates. Sarah noticed how the few employees they passed seemed to dress in muted colors, their appearances conservative and uniform. The conference room was intimidating, with a long mahogany table surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. 3 people sat across from where Sarah was directed to sit. Mr. Harrison, the department head with graying temples and an expensive suit; Ms. Chen, the HR director wearing a navy blue dress suit; and Mr. Thompson, the regional manager who looked like he had stepped out of a 1950s business magazine. "Please have a seat," Mr. Harrison said, gesturing to the chair across from them. His voice was formal and distant. Sarah sat down and placed her portfolio on the table, maintaining eye contact and projecting confidence despite the cold atmosphere. Ms. Chen opened a file and began reviewing Sarah's resume aloud, highlighting her impressive credentials and achievements. Mr. Thompson nodded approvingly at her sales figures from her previous job, and even Mr. Harrison seemed interested when she described her innovative marketing campaigns. "Your qualifications are certainly impressive," Mr. Harrison admitted, leaning back in his chair. "However, we have certain standards at Pinnacle Financial Services. Our clients expect a particular image when they work with us." Sarah felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "I understand the importance of representing the company well," she replied. "I've always maintained the highest professional standards in my previous positions." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and exchanged a glance with his colleagues. "We appreciate that, Ms. Martinez, but we need to address something that could be problematic for our corporate image." The room fell silent, and Sarah could feel all 3 pairs of eyes studying her intently. She knew what was coming, but she had hoped that in 2023 things might be different. She had hoped that her qualifications would speak louder than outdated prejudices. Ms. Chen leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "During our preliminary background check and review process, we've become aware that you have visible tattoos. While we haven't seen them today due to your professional attire, our research indicates that you have quite extensive artwork on your arms and possibly other areas." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, I do have tattoos. However, as you can see, they don't interfere with my ability to dress professionally or represent a company appropriately." Mr. Harrison shook his head slowly. "Ms. Martinez, you have to understand our position. Pinnacle Financial Services caters to a very conservative clientele. Our clients are traditional business owners, retirees, and established families who expect a certain image from our employees. Visible tattoos simply don't align with the image we've worked decades to cultivate." The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah had faced this situation before, but it never got easier. She had spent years building her expertise, earning her degree, and proving herself in the business world, only to be judged by the art she chose to display on her skin. "I'm curious," Sarah said calmly. "Have any of your current employees ever been asked to hide or remove parts of themselves to work here?" Ms. Chen bristled at the question. "This isn't about discrimination, Ms. Martinez. It's about maintaining professional standards and meeting client expectations." Surely you can understand that. Mr. Thompson nodded in agreement. We're not saying you're not qualified for the position. Your resume speaks for itself, but we need assurance that you would be willing to keep any body art completely covered during work hours and all client interactions. Sarah felt a surge of frustration, but channeled it into determination. She had anticipated this conversation and had prepared for this moment. What they didn't know was that her tattoos weren't just random designs or rebellious statements from her youth. Each piece of artwork on her body told a story, and one particular piece told a story that would change everything about this conversation. She looked at each of the 3 interviewers, taking a moment to study their faces. They sat there with their assumptions and their predetermined notions about who she was and what she represented. They expected compliance, expected her to shrink herself to fit into their narrow definition of professionalism. But Sarah Martinez had never been one to shrink. Sarah took a deep breath and looked directly at Mr. Harrison. "I appreciate your honesty about your concerns," she said, her voice steady, but with an undertone that suggested she wasn't finished with this conversation. "Before I respond to your requirements, I'd like to share something with you that might provide some context." The 3 interviewers exchanged glances, clearly not expecting her to push back. Most candidates in this situation would either comply immediately or excuse themselves from the interview. Ms. Chen tapped her pen impatiently against her notepad, while Mr. Thompson checked his watch, suggesting they were ready to move on to more compliant candidates. "Ms. Martinez," Mr. Harrison interrupted, "we really don't need to hear personal stories about your tattoo choices. What we need is a simple commitment that you'll keep them covered if you work here." Sarah smiled, but there was something different about her expression now. It wasn't the nervous smile of someone desperate for approval. It was the confident smile of someone who held cards that others couldn't see. "Actually, Mr. Harrison, I think you do need to hear this story. You see, my tattoos aren't just personal expressions or artistic choices. They're part of my professional journey, and one in particular relates directly to this company." Mr. Thompson leaned forward, his curiosity getting the better of his impatience. "What do you mean it relates to this company?" Sarah slowly began to roll up the sleeve of her right arm, revealing the edge of what appeared to be an intricate design. The 3 interviewers watched with a mixture of fascination and horror as she exposed more of the artwork. "This tattoo," Sarah said, pointing to a beautiful, detailed piece that wrapped around her forearm, "commemorates the most important business lesson I ever learned. It's a reminder of a deal that changed my life and taught me everything I know about integrity, perseverance, and true professional excellence." Ms. Chen's eyes widened as she got a closer look at the tattoo. It wasn't the crude amateur work they had probably imagined. It was an exquisite piece of art, clearly done by a master tattoo artist, with intricate details and stunning colors that told a complex story. "The centerpiece of this design," Sarah continued, now fully confident and in control of the room, "represents a business partnership that saved a failing company and preserved hundreds of jobs. It's a memorial to a handshake deal that was worth more than any written contract." Mr. Harrison found himself leaning forward despite his previous dismissiveness. "I don't understand what this has to do with your interview here." Sarah's smile grew wider. "The company that was saved? The partnership that this tattoo commemorates? It was the deal that kept Pinnacle Financial Services from going bankrupt 12 years ago." The silence in the room was deafening. Ms. Chen's pen fell from her hand and clattered. Onto the conference table, Mr. Thompson's mouth opened slightly, and Mr. Harrison's confident demeanor began to crack. 12 years ago," Sarah continued, her voice now carrying the authority of someone who knew she held all the power in the room, "a small marketing firm took a massive risk on a struggling financial services company. They provided 6 months of free marketing services, restructured the company's entire brand image, and personally guaranteed the success of a new client acquisition campaign." Mr. Harrison's face had gone pale. "You can't possibly mean—" "Martinez Marketing Solutions," Sarah said, watching as recognition dawned on their faces. "My father's company. The company that created the marketing strategy that turned Pinnacle Financial Services from a failing local business into the regional powerhouse it is today." The tattoo on Sarah's arm depicted a phoenix rising from flames, but woven into the design were subtle elements that anyone familiar with Pinnacle's early branding would recognize. The color scheme, the geometric patterns, even the font style that spelled out honor in elegant script. It all connected to the rebranding campaign that had saved their company. Ms. Chen was frantically flipping through papers in her file, as if trying to verify what Sarah was saying. Mr. Thompson had gone completely silent, staring at the tattoo with growing recognition. Mr. Harrison was struggling to process this revelation. "Your father, Eduardo Martinez?" Mr. Harrison asked weakly. "The same Eduardo Martinez who mortgaged his house to keep your company afloat when no bank would lend to you," Sarah confirmed. "The same man who worked 18-hour days for 6 months, who brought in his daughter, me, to help with research and strategy development during summer breaks from college." Sarah rolled up her sleeve further, revealing more of the tattoo. "Every element of this design represents a part of that campaign. The phoenix represents Pinnacle's rebirth. These flames represent the near collapse that almost destroyed everything. And this," she pointed to a small, intricate detail near her wrist, "this represents the handshake between my father and your founder, Michael Pinnacle, when they agreed to the partnership that saved this company." Mr. Thompson finally found his voice. "But why didn't you mention this in your application? Why didn't you tell us who you were?" Sarah's expression became more serious. "Because I wanted to be hired based on my own merits, not my family connections. I wanted to prove that Sarah Martinez could earn her place here through her own qualifications and achievements." The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone in the room. They had been ready to reject her because of the very tattoo that honored their company's salvation. They had judged her based on their assumptions about what tattoos represented, never considering that this particular artwork might tell a story of loyalty, dedication, and business success. "But there's more to this story," Sarah said, her voice taking on a tone that suggested they hadn't heard the most important part yet. "And I think you need to hear the rest before you make any decisions about my employment here." The conference room had transformed from a place of judgment to a space of stunned revelation. Sarah could see the 3 interviewers struggling to reconcile their preconceived notions with the reality of what they had just learned, but she wasn't finished yet. "The rest of the story," Sarah continued, "involves a promise that was made during that partnership 12 years ago. A promise that I'm not sure anyone in this room remembers." Mr. Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair. As the current department head, he had been with the company during its darkest days, though he had been in a junior position at the time. "What kind of promise?" he asked cautiously. Sarah reached into her portfolio and pulled out a worn folder. From it, she extracted a yellowed document with several signatures at the bottom. "This is a copy of the partnership agreement between Martinez Marketing Solutions and Pinnacle Financial Services. My father kept meticulous records of all business dealings." She placed the document on the table and pointed to a specific clause. "Section 12, subsection C. It states that in recognition of the extraordinary risk taken by Martinez Marketing Solutions, Pinnacle Financial Services agrees to give first consideration for any future marketing positions to qualified members of the Martinez family, should they ever apply." Ms. Chen grabbed the document and read the clause aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. The legal language was clear and binding, assuming the document was authentic. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "there's a personal letter from Michael Pinnacle to my father, written 6 months after the campaign's success." She pulled out another document. This one a handwritten letter on official Pinnacle letterhead. Mr. Thompson took the letter and read it silently, his expression changing with each line. Finally, he looked up at his colleagues. "It's genuine. I recognize Michael's handwriting. He writes here that he considers Eduardo Martinez a true partner and friend, and that Pinnacle will always have a place for the Martinez family." The weight of these revelations was settling over the room like a heavy blanket, but Sarah could see that Mr. Harrison was still struggling with something, still trying to maintain some semblance of his original position. "Even if all of this is true," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence, "we still have our image standards to consider. Our clients—" Sarah held up her hand to stop him. "Let me tell you about your clients, Mr. Harrison. Let me tell you about the people you think would be offended by my tattoos." She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo. "This is Margaret Whitman, age 73, retired teacher, and one of your largest individual investors. She has a butterfly tattoo on her ankle that she got on her 60th birthday to celebrate surviving breast cancer." The 3 interviewers leaned forward to look at the photo, which showed an elderly woman with a warm smile, proudly showing off a small, colorful butterfly tattoo. This is Robert Chen. No relation to Ms. Chen here, Sarah continued, showing another photo. He's a veteran who invested his military pension with Pinnacle 5 years ago. He has a full-sleeve tattoo commemorating his service in Vietnam, including the names of fallen comrades. Ms. Chen, the HR director, was staring at the photos with growing discomfort, realizing how wrong her assumptions had been. And this, Sarah said, showing a third photo, is Maria Santos, a small business owner who has invested over $2 million with Pinnacle over the past 8 years. She has tattoos covering both arms, each one representing a milestone in building her construction company from nothing. Mr. Thompson was shaking his head slowly. How do you know all of our clients? How do you have these photos? Sarah's smile returned, and this time it carried a hint of something that made all 3 interviewers nervous. Because I've been researching this company for months. Not just for this interview, but because I've been curious about what happened to the company my father helped save. She pulled out a tablet and showed them a spreadsheet. I've been tracking Pinnacle's growth, its client base, its market position. Do you know what I discovered? The 3 interviewers remained silent, sensing that they were about to learn something they wouldn't like. Pinnacle Financial Services has been losing market share for the past 3 years. Your client acquisition rate has dropped by 35%, and your client retention rate has fallen to its lowest point since the company's near collapse 12 years ago. Mr. Harrison's face flushed red. That information is confidential. How could you possibly? Public records, financial filings, and market analysis, Sarah replied smoothly. All perfectly legal research. And do you know what the primary reason is for your declining performance? She turned the tablet around so they could see a client satisfaction survey summary. According to independent market research, potential clients view Pinnacle as outdated, disconnected from modern values, and unwelcoming to diverse clientele. The silence stretched on as the implications of Sarah's research sank in. She had just presented evidence that their conservative, traditional approach, the very approach they were using to justify rejecting her, was actually hurting their business. But here's the most interesting part, Sarah said, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a final, decisive blow. 3 of your biggest competitors have recently hired marketing executives with visible tattoos, and all 3 have seen significant increases in client acquisition among younger demographics and minority-owned businesses. She showed them news articles about competing firms and their recent successes. The market is changing, and Pinnacle is being left behind because it's clinging to outdated ideas about what professionalism looks like. Mr. Harrison was struggling to maintain his composure. Even if that's true, we can't just abandon our core values. Your core values, Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp for the first time. Your core value used to be giving people a chance, taking risks on partnerships that others wouldn't consider. That's how you survived 12 years ago. Now your core value seems to be conformity and exclusion. The 3 interviewers exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had entered this meeting expecting to easily dismiss a candidate based on their prejudices, but instead they had been systematically dismantled by someone who clearly understood their business better than they did. There's one more thing you need to know, Sarah said, and her tone suggested that whatever came next would be the most important revelation of all. Sarah reached back into her portfolio and pulled out a thick folder that she had kept separate from the other documents. The 3 interviewers watched nervously as she placed it on the table with deliberate care. This folder contains something that I wasn't planning to share today, she said, her voice becoming more serious. But given the direction this conversation has taken, I think you need to see it. Mr. Harrison eyed the folder suspiciously. What is it? It's a business proposal, Sarah replied. A comprehensive marketing strategy that could turn Pinnacle's declining performance around within 18 months. She opened the folder to reveal a professionally bound document, complete with charts, graphs, and detailed analysis. Ms. Chen leaned forward to get a better look. You prepared a business proposal for a job interview? I prepared this proposal because I believe in what Pinnacle could become, Sarah explained. Despite how I've been treated here today, despite the assumptions you've made about me, I still see the potential in this company. She flipped to a page showing projected revenue increases. This strategy focuses on modernizing Pinnacle's image while honoring its core mission of financial security and trust. It targets 3 key demographics that you're currently losing to competitors. Mr. Thompson studied the numbers with growing interest. Even through his bias and discomfort, he couldn't ignore the impressive projections. These revenue projections, are they realistic? They're conservative, Sarah replied. I've based them on successful campaigns I've implemented at my previous companies, adjusted for Pinnacle's current market position and resources. She turned to another section of the proposal. The strategy includes a complete digital transformation, community outreach programs, and partnerships with local businesses that reflect the diversity of your potential client base. Mr. Harrison was struggling between his prejudices and the undeniable quality of what he was seeing. This level of work. How long did this take you? 3 months, Sarah said simply. 3 months of research, analysis, and strategic planning. Because unlike what you seem to think, my tattoos don't make me less professional or less dedicated. If anything, they represent my commitment to seeing projects through to completion, even when they're painful. She pointed to another design on her arm that had been partially visible. This tattoo took 42 hours across 6 sessions to complete. It represents my commitment to my father's business philosophy, that excellence requires patience, endurance, and the willingness to invest in long-term success rather than quick fixes. Ms. Chen was flipping through the proposal, her expression changing from skepticism to amazement. This section on client retention strategies, it addresses every weakness in our current approach. Because I've been studying your company for months, Sarah replied. Not to exploit weaknesses, but to understand how to help you succeed. My father taught me that true partnership means understanding your allies' challenges as well as your own strengths. She turned to a page showing a detailed timeline. This implementation plan accounts for Pinnacle's current staffing levels, budget constraints, and market position. It's not a theoretical exercise, it's a practical roadmap designed specifically for your situation. Mr. Thompson was shaking his head in disbelief. Why would you do all this work for a company that hasn't even hired you? Sarah's expression softened slightly. Because Pinnacle Financial Services represents something important to my family. My father didn't just save this company for the money, though he certainly needed it at the time. He saved it because he believed in what it stood for. She pulled out one final document, this one showing photos of Pinnacle's early days. These are pictures my father took during the partnership 12 years ago. Look at the faces of your employees when they realized the company would survive. The photos showed people celebrating, shaking hands, and clearly experiencing relief and joy. Among them was a much younger Mr. Harrison, smiling broadly as he received news that his job was secure. That's you, isn't it, Mr. Harrison? Sarah asked gently. You were one of the people my father's work saved. Mr. Harrison stared at the photo, his expression crumbling as the memory came flooding back. I remember that day. I had been preparing to look for another job. I thought everything was over. My father came home that night and told me about the people at Pinnacle, Sarah continued. He said they weren't just clients or business partners. They were people with families, dreams, and responsibilities who deserved a chance to succeed. The room fell silent as the emotional weight of the situation settled over everyone. The 3 interviewers were being forced to confront not just their prejudices about tattoos, but their understanding of what their company represented and who they had become. So when I applied for this position, Sarah continued, it wasn't just about getting a job. It was about honoring my father's legacy and helping to restore Pinnacle to the company it once was, one that took chances on people and valued substance over surface appearances. Ms. Chen closed the proposal and looked directly at Sarah. Your father, is he still in business? Sarah's expression became sad for the first time during the interview. My father passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. This tattoo, she pointed to the Phoenix design, was completed just before he died. It was his idea to include the elements representing Pinnacle's rebirth. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Mr. Harrison put his head in his hands, and even Mr. Thompson's stern demeanor cracked. He wanted me to remember, Sarah said quietly, that sometimes the most important business relationships aren't about contracts or profits. They're about people helping people succeed, regardless of how different they might appear on the surface. She began gathering her documents, preparing to leave. I think we're finished here. You've made your position clear about what kind of person you think represents Pinnacle Financial Services. But as she stood to leave, Mr. Harrison suddenly spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. Wait. Sarah paused at the door, her hand on the handle but didn't turn around immediately. The word wait hung in the air like a bridge between two different versions of how this story could end. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and spoke again, his voice stronger but filled with emotion. "Please sit back down. I need to say something." Sarah turned slowly, studying his face. The arrogance and prejudice that had defined his earlier demeanor were gone, replaced by something that looked like shame and genuine remorse. She walked back to the table but remained standing. 12 years ago, Mr. Harrison began, his voice shaking slightly. I was 28 years old, married for 6 months, and my wife was pregnant with our first child. When your father walked into this building, I was cleaning out my desk, preparing to tell my pregnant wife that I had lost my job. He looked up at Sarah, his eyes reflecting a painful memory. Your father didn't just save the company. He saved my family's future, my marriage, my ability to provide for my child. I worked directly with him during those 6 months. Ms. Chen and Mr. Thompson watched in stunned silence as their colleague struggled with his emotions. Eduardo Martinez was the most professional person I had ever met, Mr. Harrison continued. Not because of how he dressed or looked, but because of how he treated people. He learned every employee's name, asked about our families, and worked harder than anyone to make sure we all had a future here. Sarah remained standing, but her expression had softened slightly. He had tattoos then too, Mr. Harrison said, a small smile breaking through his distress. I remember because during one of our late-night strategy sessions he rolled up his sleeves and I saw artwork on his arms. I was young and stupid, and I made some comment about it being unprofessional. Sarah's eyebrows raised slightly. This was a detail she hadn't known about her father. Do you know what he told me? Mr. Harrison asked. He said that every tattoo told a story of something important in his life, and that the day he stopped being proud of his story was the day he would stop being effective at helping other people write theirs. The room was completely silent except for the distant hum of the building's air conditioning. When I saw your tattoos today, when I made those comments about image and client expectations, Mr. Harrison shook his head. I betrayed everything. Your father taught me about what real professionalism means. I became exactly the kind of person he was trying to help me avoid becoming. Sarah finally sat back down, her posture still guarded but no longer defensive. Ms. Chen spoke up for the first time in several minutes. Sarah, I owe you an apology as well. When I reviewed your resume, I was so impressed by your qualifications that I actually recommended you for this interview. But the moment we started talking about your tattoos, I let fear and prejudice override my professional judgment. She gestured toward the proposal that was still open on the table. This work you've done, it's exactly what we need. It's exactly what I've been trying to convince leadership we need for months, but I was too focused on maintaining the status quo to push harder. Mr. Thompson, who had been the quietest during this emotional revelation, finally spoke. Sarah, I have a confession to make. I've been with Pinnacle for 15 years and I've watched us lose ground to our competitors for the past 3. I knew we needed to change, but I was afraid of taking risks. He pointed to the proposal. What you've created here isn't just a marketing strategy. It's a roadmap for saving the company again, just like your father did 12 years ago. Sarah looked at each of them, processing what she was hearing. Are you telling me this because you feel guilty or because you genuinely believe I'm the right person for this job? Mr. Harrison answered immediately. Both, but more importantly, because rejecting you would be the biggest mistake this company has made since we almost went bankrupt. He stood up and walked around the table to face her directly. Sarah, I want to offer you this position, but not just the senior marketing role we advertised. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I want to offer you the position of marketing director, with full authority to implement the strategy you've outlined here. I want to give you the resources and support to transform this company the way your father did. Ms. Chen nodded enthusiastically. The salary would be 40% higher than what we advertised, plus performance bonuses tied to the revenue projections in your proposal. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering not just the offer but the journey that had led to this moment. There are conditions, she said finally. Name them, Mr. Thompson replied immediately. First, I want a written commitment that Pinnacle Financial Services will never again make employment decisions based on someone's appearance, tattoos, or personal style choices, as long as they can perform their job effectively. Agreed, Mr. Harrison said without hesitation. Second, I want authority to hire my own team, including people who might not fit your traditional image expectations but who have the skills and passion to drive results. Done, Ms. Chen confirmed. Third, Sarah said, her voice becoming more emotional, I want to establish the Eduardo Martinez Excellence Award, given annually to an employee who demonstrates the kind of integrity, innovation, and commitment to helping others that my father showed. All three interviewers nodded immediately. Mr. Harrison extended his hand. We'd be honored to create that award. Sarah looked at his outstretched hand, then at the faces of the three people who had judged her so harshly just an hour earlier. She thought about her father, about the lessons he had taught her, and about the opportunity to honor his legacy while building her own. There's one more condition, she said, not yet taking his hand. I want to meet with Michael Pinnacle, the company founder. If I'm going to help rebuild this company's reputation and values, I want to make sure we're all aligned on what those values should be. Mr. Harrison's smile grew wider. I'll call him as soon as we finish here. I know he'll want to meet Eduardo Martinez's daughter. Sarah finally reached out and shook his hand, sealing not just an employment agreement but a commitment to change. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Harrison. But I have one request for my first day. What's that? Sarah smiled. The first, genuinely warm expression she had shown since entering the building. I'd like to wear short sleeves. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood in the same conference room where her journey at Pinnacle Financial Services had begun, but everything about the space felt different. The sterile white and chrome had been softened with warmer colors. Plants lined the windows, and the walls now displayed photos celebrating the diversity of both employees and clients. She was wearing a sleeveless blouse that proudly displayed her tattoos, and she wasn't alone. Around the conference table sat her newly assembled marketing team. Marcus, a brilliant digital strategist with geometric tattoos covering his hands. Priya, a data analyst with a beautiful henna-inspired piece wrapping around her wrist. And David, a former military veteran whose sleeve tattoo honored his fallen comrades. The quarterly numbers are in, Sarah announced, pulling up a presentation on the large screen. Client acquisition is up 67%. Retention rates have increased to their highest levels in company history, and we've brought in over $12 million in new business. The room erupted in applause. Mr. Harrison, who had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters, shook his head in amazement. These results exceed even the most optimistic projections in your original proposal. The Eduardo Martinez Excellence Award ceremony is next week, Ms. Chen added, smiling. We received over 50 nominations from employees recognizing colleagues who exemplified integrity and innovation. Sarah felt a warm sense of pride, knowing her father would have been amazed by how his legacy had grown and evolved. The award had become more than just a memorial. It had become a symbol of the company's commitment to valuing people for their contributions, rather than their appearances. There's something else, Mr. Thompson said, pulling out a newspaper. The Business Journal named Pinnacle Financial Services as one of the top 10 most innovative companies in the region. They specifically mentioned our inclusive culture and modern approach to client relations. Sarah took the newspaper and read the headline. Pinnacle Financial Services, a phoenix rising from conservative tradition. The article featured a large photo of Sarah and her team, their tattoos clearly visible standing in front of the Pinnacle logo. The phoenix metaphor again, Sarah murmured, touching the tattoo on her arm that had started this whole transformation. Speaking of phoenixes, a familiar voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Michael Pinnacle himself, the company founder who was now in his 70s but still sharp and energetic. Sarah had met with him several times over the past months, and she had been amazed to discover that he remembered her father with great fondness and respect. More importantly, he had been enthusiastic about the changes she was bringing to the company. I have an announcement, Michael said, walking into the room with the confidence of someone who had built something meaningful. The board of directors has voted unanimously to promote Sarah Martinez to Vice President of Marketing and Brand Development. The room exploded in cheers and congratulations. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the moment, thinking about how far she had come from that first interview where she had been judged for the art on her skin. But that's not all, Michael continued, holding up his hand for silence. We're also implementing the Martinez Initiative, a company-wide program to actively recruit talented individuals who might be overlooked by other firms due to appearance, background, or unconventional paths to success. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Michael, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing, he replied. Your father saved this company once by teaching us to value substance over surface. You've saved it again by reminding us that innovation comes from embracing differences, not hiding from them. Later that evening, Sarah sat in her new corner office, looking out at the city skyline. The walls were decorated with both her business achievements and photos from her father's partnership with Pinnacle, all those years ago. Her phone buzzed with a text from her cousin Maria. Saw the newspaper article. Dad would be so proud. You're honoring his legacy while creating your own. Sarah smiled and looked down at the phoenix tattoo on her arm. The artwork that had nearly cost her this opportunity had instead become the symbol of the company's transformation. Every time clients or employees commented on it, she got to tell the story of partnership, resilience, and the power of giving people a chance to prove their worth. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Marcus poked his head in. Hey boss, there's someone here to see you. Says she has an interview scheduled. Sarah looked at her calendar, confused. I don't have any interviews today. She insists you'll want to see her. Says her name is Jennifer Walsh and she's applying for the junior marketing position. She seemed nervous about something. Sarah's curiosity was piqued. Send her in. A young woman entered the office, clearly nervous and fidgeting with the sleeves of her blazer. She looked to be in her early 20s with perfectly styled hair and conservative business attire. Ms. Martinez? I'm sorry to bother you without an appointment, but I wanted to apply for the marketing position I saw advertised. Sarah gestured for her to sit. Of course. Do you have a resume with you? Jennifer handed over a folder, but Sarah noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Ms. Walsh, are you all right? You seem nervous about something beyond the normal interview jitters. Jennifer took a deep breath. Ms. Martinez, I've heard about the changes you've made here, about how Pinnacle now values diversity and gives people chances they might not get elsewhere. That's true, Sarah confirmed. What makes you think you need that kind of chance? Slowly, Jennifer rolled up her sleeves, revealing intricate tattoos covering both arms. The artwork was stunning, a mix of literary quotes, mathematical equations, and artistic flourishes that clearly told the story of someone passionate about learning and creativity. Every other company I've applied to has rejected me before even looking at my qualifications, Jennifer said, her voice stronger now that her secret was revealed. But I heard about you, about what happened in your interview, and I thought maybe here would be different. Sarah smiled, feeling the beautiful symmetry of the moment. Jennifer, tell me about your tattoos. What's their story? Each quote represents a book that changed my life. The equations represent mathematical concepts that fascinate me. And these flourishes, while she pointed to decorative elements woven throughout the design, represent the art classes I took to pay for college. What's your educational background? Master's in Marketing from State University, summa cum laude. I also have certifications in digital analytics and social media strategy. I've been working freelance because no traditional company would hire me. Sarah looked at Jennifer's resume and was impressed by both her credentials and her portfolio of freelance work. But more than that, she saw something of herself in this young woman's determination to succeed despite facing prejudice. Jennifer, I'd like to offer you the position, but not just as a junior marketer. Jennifer's eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, I'd like to offer you a role as marketing specialist with a focus on developing our youth outreach and digital engagement strategies. Your combination of academic excellence and real-world experience is exactly what we need. Tears formed in Jennifer's eyes. Really? You're not concerned about what clients will think? Sarah stood up and walked around her desk, extending her hand to Jennifer. Our clients have learned to judge us by our results, not our appearance. And our results speak for themselves. As Jennifer shook her hand, Sarah thought about the cycle that was continuing. She had fought for the right to be valued for her abilities rather than judged for her tattoos. And now she was in a position to offer that same opportunity to others. Welcome to Pinnacle Financial Services, Jennifer. I think you're going to love it here. Looking back at her phoenix tattoo one more time, Sarah realized that the story it told was still being written. Her father had saved the company once, and she had helped it transform into something even better. Now she was helping others write their own stories of professional success and personal authenticity. The phoenix had indeed risen from the flames, not just once, but again and again, each time becoming stronger and more beautiful than before.